Welcome to Poetry Vespers, sponsored by the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Detroit and offered on Zoom the fourth Thursday of each month at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Next month's guests are Judy and Charlie Bryce, who will present the theme of love with their poetry and musical selections. Please jot down Thursday, September 28th at 7 p.m. Eastern on your calendars. In addition, if you would like to be on our list, our email list, it's blank copy. Please put your name and/or your email address into the chat, and Dan will add you to the list. And I only write a couple or three times a month, so you won't be bombarded with too many. I want to say thanks again always to Dan Secrest for being the Zoom coordinator. I can't do without him here, ever. So, let's welcome poet Hiram Larew. During his career, and this is really very impressive, he guided U.S. government food security programs. His most recent collection of poems, Patchy Ways, was released by Cyberwit Press in 2023. His poems have appeared in recent issues of Poetry South, Iowa Review, Poetry Scotland's Gallus, Contemporary American Voices, and have received the Louisiana Literature Prize, the Washington Review Poetry Blue Ribbon, and 4 nominations for Pushcart. He's received support for the arts councils and food banks, as well as the United Nations, for his poetry against hunger, an initiative that is bringing a world of poets to an anti-hunger cause. And he founded the Voices of Woodlawn, a powerful program of poetry, music, and art that explores America's tragic history and legacy of slavery. And we'll hear from that collection a little bit later. He's a courtesy faculty at the 5 U.S. universities and lives in Maryland, or more appropriately called Maryland, he says tonight. At the end of the program, we hope to have a few minutes for discussion. If you can hang around, that would be wonderful. We'll understand if you can't, but it'll give you a chance to interact with the poet himself. Hiram, welcome to Poetry Vespers.
Thank you so much, Nancy. And as Nancy would say, I also want to thank, Nancy, Owen Nelson, and Dan Secrest, and the whole Detroit Unitarian Universalist Vespers Poetry Reading Series team for this chance to visit with you this evening. I'm going to assume that everyone's in the evening time zone. And welcome to this, what I call Wander the Wonder program. A lot of my poetry tends to wander. And with more and more years accumulating, the wander is often towards wonder. And so I hope you'll hear some of that meander and some of that surprise, some of that wonder in this evening's program. Just as much, I want to also showcase the wonder, the power of collaborations and partnerships in what's presented this evening. Working with others is, I think you would all agree, a gift worth sharing. And so, to get started, and in that spirit of wonder and partnership, here's a video of friend Stephanie Niles translating and reading one of my poems titled Clusters, about the wonders of adolescence. Stephanie reads her German translation of the poem, which first appeared in a lunar calendar, the 2023 lunar calendar from Lunar Press, and then in Patchy Ways. She reads the poem in German, but the text of the poem is scrolled, and you'll be able to follow it both in German and in English. So Dan, I think we're ready for that first video.
Himmelskörper, ein Gedicht bei Hiram Larew, Übersetzung Stephanie Niles. Als ich 15 war, lernte ich den Mond zu besuchen, mit einem Rucksack voller Wunder. Meine Farben waren Sterne. Was für ein Anblick, meine Himmelskörper. Reise kam gefaltet in Decken. Ich spazierte des Mondes Ebene wie Silber und wusste, bevor ich jemals etwas anderes wusste, wie kühn etwas Leises und Einsames wirklich sein kann.
So a short video of Stephanie Niles reading the poem Cluster as one indication of the kind of partnerships that at least I highly value in the poetry community. I'd like to read a couple of poems. The first one is all about the love of and wonder with a place. This poem was written while I was on a writer residency at what's called the Heinrich Böll Writer's Cottage on Achill Island in County Mayo, Ireland. It's appeared in Words for the Wild, the Echo World, and New Ulster, but it also appears in my collection, Mud Ajar, that was released from Atmosphere Press in 2021. The only thing I'll say about the poem is that the potato blight famine occurred in Ireland from 1845 to 1849. In order to get to Achill Island, you cross from mainland Ireland over Achill Sound to get to the island. The poem's title is Achill Sound. When the roads curve like sound and dip, as if lifting to bow, whenever all thoughts round or cluster, or when hearts call down, is Ireland. And as rich when poor was, or as wise as bare heads in snow seemed, and as twigs so frail broke into song, and as true as any blight or potato could be, was Ireland. So when sand laps the senses, or salt drips the edges as dreams, whenever hope streams through such heavens, and moss comes home, or hearts beam down, is Ireland. My love song, or my love song to Ireland. If you haven't been, go. That's all I'll say. Ireland's remarkable. This second poem is what I call a joy song of wonder for the out of doors. It first appeared in Thieving Magpies, and then it jumped onto and grabbed the back cover of my most recent collection, Patchy Ways. It's titled In Waiting. When I speak twig above me, the sounds are unimaginable. Each swollen bud laces its shoes, and those earwigs, their pinches, squeak out to my growing gold days. They grab my damp hearts in waiting. And when I see such tremendous shake salting importance on birds' tails, or feel a will that won't, that matters. It's then from roofs atop me that sudden notions wing me towards how to live. When I turn into twigs now, my sap dives deeper, and the claps clap louder up in those winking drip song wisely eaves. So as I say, kind of a joy song for the out of doors. So the next video is so special because it comes from Zimbabwe. I've been fortunate enough to cheer on a journal that several young Zimbabwean poets have created called The Sailor's Review, founded by Taku Chikepi. In this video, one of the poet sailors, Dr. Tembe Tanya, reads a love poem, Clatter, in her beautiful accent. This poem first appeared in 21st Century Flow, and then in my collection, Mud Jar. And if you'd like to hear Dr. Tembe read the poem in Shona, which is one of the predominant languages in Zimbabwe, I'll post the link to the video in the chat later. So here's Dr. Tembe introducing herself first, and then reading the poem, the love poem, Clatter.
Art is therapy as much as it is entertainment. My name is Tembe Tanya Madiwa, aka Dr. Tembe Tanya. Today we are going to be reading poetry as the Sailors Review team, initiated by Dr. Hiram Larew, based in the United States of America. The reading is being taken from his anthology, Mud Jar. And the Sailors Review team is comprised of Tatenda Murangi, aka Sivuko, in absentia, Martin Chivaku, aka at the scripture, Brian Manyati, aka Towanda Ryan, and we are #SailorsTranslate. This is Dr. Tembe Tanya, and I'll be reading the poem titled Clatter by Dr. Hiram Larew. Love me in the very same way that the word unbeknownst sounds in mid-air. Yes, oh, just like how spires climb to the very top. And then, even beyond soap sleep or noon's drift, and as far as poodles can jump, love to love me like that. And love me as if handshakes were greens, or as when echoes find their tunnel. Love me like those birds that love diving and corners, or just like sunlight is love as it teases the cupboards. Love me in all those ways and more, and with the sashes open. Love me now, but also then, and as much as when lunch is served. With all of that back and forth and clatter. Yes, love me as surely as cups that will spill. Or then above, with nights excel, when listening turns to dreams. Love me like the swelling dim within the word abound. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tenby. That was Dr. Tenby. And as you saw there for just a second, as I said, the Shona version is just as lovely, but in the interest of time, I think we'll go ahead and move on. But Dr. Tenby represents that kind of international partnership that is so important to all of us in the poetry world. And I really am grateful to her and the entire Sailors Review team for partnering with me on that effort. Here's a poem that's what I call agog with gratitude. Some would call it a list poem. It's fairly short. It also appears in Patchy Ways. It's titled Fun. For whatever gurgles or winks first or strays, for what lives like maps or rummages, and for corners near or far, or noons that are in love with weathered rocks, for this vista's curve and slant, and for fences lost in weeds, for all the fun that sideway makes, and especially for whatever shares the shade. So the next few minutes are a public service announcement. I hope you'll bear with me. This segment is all about poetry that fights hunger. 5 years ago, I noticed that there wasn't much poetry on offer about empty stomach hunger. There was a little bit, but not nearly as much as there should be. And so I launched an initiative called Poetry X Hunger as a way to, as I say, bring a world of poets to the anti-hunger cause. In collaboration with United Nations, with several food banks, and with a couple of arts councils and several others, we now have a website, www.poetryxhunger.com, which I'll try to remember to post in the chat afterwards. That website holds a treasure trove of about 400 poems about hunger's many facets by poets from literally around the world. And importantly, those poems are being used to raise awareness in classrooms about hunger, raise awareness about hunger and its many guises and its threat to us all in classrooms, at houses of worship, in town hall meetings, at fundraisers on Capitol Hill and elsewhere. Just as significantly, the poems are helping to open up purses and wallets. Using the poems and artwork created in response to some of those poems, we've recently raised more than $5,000 for Feed the Children, and another $1,000 for Roots for Life, a community anti-hunger organization in Washington, D.C. We'll be holding another fundraising reading on September 23rd, which happens to be Hunger Action Day. And that reading will benefit Seed Programs International to collect donations for school gardens in Uganda. So to give you an idea of the kind of really moving poetry that is on the website and all freely available for use. Here's a video of poet Brian Donald James from Fairfax, Virginia, USA, reading his poem, Testimony, which won the 2020 World Food Day Prize, awarded by Poetry Ex Hunger and the United Nations. So I think, Dan, we're ready for Brian Donnell James reading Testimony.
Hello, my name is Brian Donald James, and I would like to share my 2020 United Nations and Poetry Ex Hunger award-winning poem, Testimony. Testimony. I was a teenage father then, with little money. My wife and I saved our lunch so that our son could eat. And we went without a meal that day. As night approached, we had hoped that he would sleep until morning. And with every twist and turn that he made, my anxiety rose and fell. But as toddlers do, he rose hungry. Rubbing circles on his belly, he was trying to be a big boy, trying to control the desperation that I saw in his eyes. I nodded to my wife, and we gathered change from everywhere, anywhere, between cushions and under couches, closets, desk, and cabinet drawers, and I was off to shop with newly found pocket change. Enough for some instant noodles, Kool-Aid, bread, and peanut butter. Even as I counted out the change, and people in line smirked and commented, the cashier and I knew I didn't have enough. My eyes swelled as I tried to control my desperation. But she smiled and said, "Well, honey, that's just enough." Bagged my food, and I left. Walking back to our little apartment, I will never forget that feeling. Emotion overcame me, not embarrassment or shame, just thankfulness, just love. I'll do anything for my boy. In peace. Thank you so much.
That was Brian Donald James, and I think you can see why that was an award-winning poem. I have heard that poem so many times, and each time I hear it, wow. So check out Poetry Ex Hunger, and certainly, if you're so inclined, if you're writing poetry and wish to write a poem about hunger, hunger of the stomach, not hunger of the heart, not hunger of the spirit, not hunger of the soul, hunger of the stomach, please press the submission button on the website up in the right-hand upper corner, and feel free to submit for possible publication on the website. We'd love to see your work. This next poem is just downright a love poem. It's an older piece. It first appeared in Wisconsin River Valley Journal. It's titled Boat. You see, I don't care if his hair is combed bad. He is my son. I love every shoestring of him, every bit that he thinks he knows. 15 years. I don't care what he becomes, because he'll become something. Look at him. He'll become more than those red ears or grinning legs. He'll become even more important than midnight. More and more, I hold him by his shoulder less and less. And when I do, it's as if he can't be here forever. I think I'll get him a boat to carry and then watch him like the minute that just went by. In the long run, nothing I do will matter. I know that. But look at him, especially when he's reaching for something. There must be a whole other world out there somewhere that's missing him. One of the real joys of collaborating is meeting pure and sparkling talent. I'm in awe, for example, I'm in awe of the magic of Eric Epstein's work. He's a remarkable deaf poet in the Southwest US and was kind enough to collaborate with me in a translation of a poem into American Sign Language, something I've always wanted to have done with some of my work. So what you're about to see is a silent, there's nothing wrong with your speakers. This is a silent, and I say magical video of Eric Epstein's translation. As I say, nothing's wrong with your speakers. This is silent. It is captioned so that you can follow the poem as Eric signs it. So I think we're ready, Dan. That was Eric Epstein with an American Sign Language interpretation, a magical interpretation as far as I'm concerned, of a poem titled Magic. I don't know if you noticed or not, but even his tongue gets involved in that translation. I just am mesmerized every time I watch Eric in that video. And he has offered a short video explaining how he translated that. As you can imagine, the translation process, like into any language, was a little bit challenging. And he explains that in about a 4-minute video that's available on YouTube as well. Eric Epstein, if you check out his videos, you'll find it there. As my collection Mud Ajar was being assembled in 2021, the publisher suggested that I collaborate with an audiobook narrator. Oh, wow. Was I ever lucky to meet and then work with that narrator, T.A. Niles of New Mexico, USA, as he produced that audiobook. T.A. is on the session this evening. Thanks for being here, T.A. And from that venture on the audiobook, we've collaborated on several other fronts. For example, what you're about to see is a video of T.A. reading a couple of poems from some of my earlier collections. And he's helped along with harmonica music being played by friend and fine poet Cliff Bernier of Virginia, USA. You're going to see a couple of clips here if the technology cooperates. One of T.A. reading a poem titled Nervous as Pencils, and that will be followed by one where T.A. is reading a poem titled Golly.
This poem first appeared in Antietam Review, and then in Hiram's first collection, Part of. It's entitled Nervous as Pencils. What's gone by for good waves, and our teeth get worn away. The sudden smell of cleanser as fall comes in turns radios to angels, turns what we wish at windows into broth. Let it just be once. Let branches lead the way. Let them go on ahead, quiet as Davy Crockett's eyes, so that we can almost see what's coming, so that all at once, when fathers turn fragrant as frost, we won't get nervous as pencils. We're lucky to know farmers at heart. Their porch lights can be trusted like harvested stars, and their hands make such sense. We're lucky to risk even once, because whatever we predict, there are always apples waiting.
That was Nervous as Pencils.
Bad year for tomatoes.
And we'll skip ahead to a poem titled Golly.
And here is another early poem from Hiram. It first appeared in The Wild Word, and it is featured in Hiram's second collection, More Than Anything. It's entitled Golly. I don't know about you, But when a leafy branch comes in the window, I love it beyond common sense. In fact, I love anything that's where it's not supposed to be, and all the air around it. And what I live for more and more are the things that shouldn't happen. My best friend is the uh-oh sound everyone makes when a glass breaks. And my hero is Vespers. One of these days, what I hope to notice before anything else, even before eyes, is shoulders, because just like hills, they make me guess at what I'll never know.
So that was T.A. Niles reading a couple of my poems, honoring them with his voice. And as I said, he produced, narrated the audio version of Madajar, and then Cliff Bernier added that wonderful harmonica behind the poems. And I'm very grateful to both of them. So as we come into the home stretch this evening, I have to mention another venture that I believe is very, very all too timely. About 5 years ago, I took a week-long writing residency at what is called the Historic Plantation in Northern Virginia. It's called Woodlawn Plantation. It's in Northern Virginia. It was built by relatives of George Washington on property that he once owned. Woodlawn was originally lived in by 9 whites who were served by 90 enslaved blacks. And the records of those blacks are largely erased and non-existent. And so I invited 4 very talented African-American poet friends and others to join me at Woodlawn. And for a day, we wrote about that history and legacy of slavery. The resulting work of poems, artwork, and music has since been offered online in a program we call Voices of Woodlawn. I know I'm biased, but I think it's a very powerful presentation by poet Diane Wilbon-Parks, who's also a visual artist, by poet Lady Di Beverly. Both Diane and Lady Di are on the session tonight. By Patrick Washington, a wonderful poet here in the DC area. And again, we asked Cliff Bernier, that terrific harmonica player, to help us with this program. And the program looks back, yes, at that history, but it just as importantly considers how that history continues to haunt us today. So here's an outtake of the Voices of Woodlawn program. You'll first hear Patrick Washington, one of the poets from Maryland, USA, present a poem titled First Walk, about his reaction to the guided tour through Woodlawn Plantation. And then you'll hear just a minute or so of pianist and vocalist Benjamin Mertz from California, USA, singing as part of the Voices of Woodlawn program. So let me see if I can get this queued up. Give me just 1 second. You might have to turn your microphone up just a little bit. That's Lady Di, and she's just finishing a poem, and then we'll go right into Patrick Washington.
We humans too. What on earth did we do to deserve such an absurd, ridiculous way of life? Oh, Mama, will things ever change?
That's Lady Di Beverly. And next up is,
Thank you, Lady Di.
this is Patrick.
This poem is entitled First Walk. I'm not being led through these genteel halls. I'm being pushed. Each threshold I cross feels like praise is being forced through tearful, fearful throats. The words of our guide ease out with reverence as if the echo of these walls could actually slap you. And as they deliver their careful sermon, I can't help but wonder, was God ever inside here? The wood smells of elegant care and surfaces so polished that any particles daring to show up would undoubtedly slide off to the floor. After all, we are not here to see dirt, are we? Like a troublesome teen, I stand in places longer than I should, reach for delicate things I know I shouldn't, and nothing happens to me. This tour, though informative, ignored certain queries like, are the brick and mortar walls thick enough to muffle the moans of the people outside? Did they ever use the same cross-stitch sewing style from these beautiful pillows to close the skin of the disobedient? I walk out the ravenous front entrance, and after 200 years, the Corinthian marble at the door still looks as if each slab had been carefully laid there by angelic hands. One more question, ma'am. Did the masters of Woodlawn ever realize just how close they were to God?
That was First Walk by Patrick Washington, and now it will move over to just a few minutes of piano by, this is Benjamin Mertz.
John and Silas bound in jail had no money for their bail. Keep your hand on the plow and hold on. John and Silas thought they lost, but the jail cell shook and the chains come off. Keep your head on the plow and hold on.
So I hate to cut him off, but in the interest of time, I will. That was Benjamin Mertz adding his piano and wonderful voice to the Voices of Woodlawn. As I say, I believe, and I know I'm biased, but I believe it's an incredibly powerful program that needs to be heard by all these days and times. If you're interested, we can post the link to, well, all you have to do is go to YouTube and just type in Voices of Woodlawn, WOODLAWN, one word, Woodlawn, and several videos will pop up. So let me, hold on just a second. I need to stop Benjamin. There we go.
Okay. While Hiram is getting ready, let me just mention that I have in the chat his website in case you'd like to check out his work. I hope that's the right one. Yeah. So please take a look, save that somewhere. The chat will be available, I believe, later. But nonetheless, what I do is just put it on a Word document and hold on to those links. So you've got a lot of wonderful links tonight in the chat. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Nancy. That gave me time to get a couple of things queued up here. So this is the last segment that I'd like to share with you this evening. I can't remember for how long it's been that I wanted to collaborate with a whistler. I just still think there's something wonderful about whistling that just amplifies, haunts, empowers poetry. And so I was lucky enough to have Carol Ann Kaufman, the two-time world champion of musical whistling, collaborate with me on this rendition of a poem, Ode to Stubbled Fields, which was written when I was in residence at Trudy Hale's Porches Writing Retreat in Norwood, Virginia. Carol Ann Kaufman, the whistler here, lives in California, USA. And you may need to turn up your volume on this one. And you may also have to be a little bit patient with me because I want to be able to have you both hear the whistling and see the poem as it's scrolled. So give me just 1 second. Let me stop that for just a second, make sure I did. Yes, okay. Here we go. So this is Carol Ann Kaufman's whistling as I read the poem Ode to Stubbled Fields. Ode to Stubbled Fields, where mountains blend old with frost. How morning's dawn brings orange to blue inside us. Where crows that are so fully made belong, and autumn tends away, or leaves drift back, or chosen songs forever hum. Where brambles edge the less with more, and dark berries of. These marvels come so happened upon. Their early crests are all there is of knowing. Yes, where mountains blend only here with only if, and take each heart its sake to opened days in stubbled fields. So that was Carol Ann Kaufman whistling in the wonder of wonders to the poem Ode to Stubbled Fields. I can't thank you all enough for being here. I hope you've enjoyed at least a segment of the program. Again, my thanks to Nancy Owen Nelson and Dan Secrest for their help and all the behind the scenes work that they've done to make this happen. And to those of you who are here this evening. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Nancy.